The ice and the glaciers in the Arctic, in Antarctica, and in the Himalayas keeps on melting faster than anyone predicted in recent years, causing sea level rise all over the world, threatening every coastal city on every continent, and transforming the weather pattern all over Asia. As the geopolitical tension and concentration regarding the frozen areas, especially the Arctic, keeps on increasing, and with the declarations coming out of Washington in recent months has added new challenges and dimensions to the potential conflicts and disagreements regarding this important part of our planet. And as the race for the resources, the rare earths, the minerals, the energy resources, the ocean resources all over the Arctic, this important part of our planet, which is indeed, although most people don't recognize it, the shortest distance between Asia, United States, and Europe, is becoming the focal point of how the world will move forward in the coming years. And it is at these historic crossroads that we come here together in Delhi for the first major international gathering in India on the Arctic. And we are especially honored to partner with our Indian friends in bringing this together and thereby signaling not only to the other Arctic participants, whether they are the Arctic states or the observer states, the European and the other Asian states in the Arctic Council, that India has indeed decided in a significant way to enhance its involvement and participation in the growing cooperations and the resolutions of how to deal with this important part of our planet and thereby map out a different future for the world. These are indeed, these very months and the coming times, the most crucial era that we have ever faced with respect to the frozen parts of our planet. And we are very honored to have here today with us many of the most distinguished participants in that cooperation, representing multitude of countries, as well as many new members of the growing Arctic family. We in the Arctic Circle also want to use this opportunity here at the opening to thank Ólafur and its president, especially Samir Saran, for the excellent cooperation and also for the visionary way that they have joined hands with us in order to bring this about. And seeing my old friend Moderator here in front of me, I also want to thank him for being the bridge builder between the Arctic Circle and Ólafur some months ago. Without this cooperation between us and Ólafur, with President Samir and his people, this would not be possible. So I hope the Indian authorities and other leading organizations in this country realize from the product of our cooperation what we can do together. But let me also use this opportunity to thank the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Earth Sciences for our cooperation in bringing this forum about, and especially because of my conversation over recent months with His Excellency, the Foreign Minister of India, who will be here tomorrow morning for a whole hour to answer questions about India's engagement in the Arctic, for his support in various ways for bringing this forum about. And in just 2 weeks' time, the Prime Minister of India will travel to Oslo for a meeting with the Nordic Prime Ministers. Our Nordic countries represent 5 of the 8 member states of the Arctic Council. And the fact that the Prime Minister of India will so shortly after this forum travel to Oslo for an extensive discussion is of great significance. I also want to draw your attention to the fact that here at the Indian Forum, the new Emirates Polar Program will be presented for the first time at a large international gathering like this on the Arctic. The arrival of the United Arab Emirates on the scene of polar cooperation is also of great significance. And following the statement by the President of Ólafur, the new chair of the Arctic Council, the distinguished Greenland diplomat Kenneth Høegh, will make his first policy speech after being appointed as the chair of the Arctic Council senior Arctic officials for the next 2 years. That in itself is also yet another significance of the importance of this platform. And with these words, I express again our deep thanks and gratitude to Samir, Saran, and all the people at Ólafur who have, together with us, made this possible, as well as the various Indian ministries and other Indian participants who have joined hands with us. Thank you very much.
Very warm welcome to hopefully what will be a discussion on some icy regions over the next 2 days, the Arctic Circle, but deeply linked to our geography because we are home to one of the most important ice-covered landscapes on this planet, the Himalayas. And the atmospheric systems make us close cousins. And conversations that we have on the Arctic have implications on the Himalayas. And of course, the learnings and lessons from the Himalayas can inform how we respond to the new developments in that particular region. Let me first acknowledge Dr. Ravichandran, Ministry of Earth Sciences, for his leadership, partnership, and of course his instigation of ORF's focus on this area. Many months ago, sir, you had summoned us and we came to your office, and in his own gentle way, he nudged us to start thinking about a region that will inform science, geopolitics, business, and of course, the most important planetary imperative of climate response. Let me acknowledge President Grímsson. We've been a long and ardent admirer of your work, sir. I've been hearing about you. You're mythical in India. You have a legendary personality here, courtesy Milan and others who have always informed us of the very important work you have been doing. Sometimes you have not necessarily seen the support you should have received, but you plodded on and have now built a formidable forum, the Arctic Circle, which has many comers wanting to be part of it. So congratulations for the work you've done over decades in mainstreaming what is certainly going to be the most crucial of conversations for the future. Working with your team and working under your leadership has been an honor and a privilege. And hopefully this is the first of many convenings and communities that we are able to put together in the days ahead as this geography becomes vital to India and India becomes an indispensable part of that geography. Let me also, in absentia, acknowledge the contribution of Dr. Jaishankar and his team. He will be here tomorrow morning and he will be speaking to us, responding to some questions and sharing his his own vision on how India needs to be engaging with that region. And of course, let me thank my own team for putting this together in a very short duration post the Raisina dialogue and some other European forums that we have recently hosted. Now, by way of introductions, I am not going to come in the way of informed opinion and just an opinion, but I'm going to probably pose 4 big questions for us. And I hope over the next 2 days, we could, in our conversations, over dinner, lunches, and informal discussions, try and respond to these. The first big question for us is that how do we balance a climate disaster waiting to happen if we don't get our act together, and at the same time utilize the opportunity that has been offered by the melting ice in the Arctic. In some sense, while the ice melting is a clear manifestation of human failure to respond in time and to respond adequately, and we must get our act together to prevent further deleterious conditions from emerging, it is also true that the routes, sea routes that are opening up, the resources that are available, offer an opportunity for us to respond in a green manner to our industrial and development future. The trade routes in the Arctic are going to reduce the distances by perhaps 30 to 50%, reducing emissions, and in a paradoxical way, the melting of the ice is actually perhaps going to make our trading architecture more efficient. How do you balance these two different competing realities, one of climate consequences and one of climate action, both of which are going to be centered on what we do in the governance of this region? And can perhaps all of us agree to a green shipping agenda for the Arctic as a reminder of the imperative of planetary action, of global cooperation, of global coordination? And I think that's the first question, that what has Arctic taught us about climate science, about climate action, and about climate partnerships? The second big question, of course, is that we, certainly in South Asia, are deeply conscious, and by the way, you are in a month which is going to begin to see pre-monsoonic activities, and next month you're going to see the arrival of monsoons in some months. This is a region that has been nourished by an atmospheric system called the monsoons. What happens in the Arctic is going to implicate the monsoons, and monsoons in turn implicate global patterns of heat cycles. And in that sense, we have to be co-respondents, and we have to share the sciences and share our learnings around sciences together. And how can we build a science coalition, a climate science coalition, a geological and a geographic science coalition that works together in these ice-covered regions, be it in South Asia or be it in the Arctic? So is there a scientific community and a collaboration of scientific communities that can tap into each other's existential learnings? And I think that's the second big question. How do we create an academic and science network that continues to bring us all the benefits of learnings that are happening across divergent geographies? The third, of course, is I think, the big geopolitical question. And I'm going to be a little provocative, but I'm going to say that the Arctic perhaps does not belong to the Arctic countries anymore. And obviously, there are reasons for it. It has geoeconomic implications, it has trading implications, it has political contestation, it has natural resources, and many of those are going to implicate a much wider geography. And therefore, the big question is, how do you accommodate global interests in a region that was largely being managed by the custodians of the old custodians? And how do you create a cooperative framework for allowing the participation of many other stakeholders and countries such as ours in a manner that is positive and beneficial and not a zero-sum arrangement? And I think that's the big question, that how does the Arctic Circle expand and how do we have newcomers contribute in a positive and a beneficial manner? Let me give you one example. 10 million square miles. I think that's roughly, 10 million square kilometers. That's roughly the unmapped territory of the Arctic region. If we have to create maritime domain awareness, and if we have to map the sea routes, and if we have to map the melting opportunities that are now emerging, the GDPs of the Arctic countries cannot do that. You would require global coalitions to invest in creating the maps of that region so that we don't create disasters related to shipping and cruise and other industries that are emerging in that region. And if we don't do it as like-minded countries, some of the illiberal regimes will do it for sure. So how do we build a coalition of like-minded countries, of liberal democracies that can pool resources and map that region and support the Arctic countries in ensuring that both the trade as well as recreational and economic activities in that region are kept safe? We cannot leave it to the Arctic countries to bear this burden, even though they may want us to. We will have to participate with them and lend a hand in a manner that does not destabilize the region, that does not disturb the ownership of the region, and yet allows a multi-stakeholder participation in its future. And I think that's the third question. How do we create a coalition of countries that are like-minded, that seek to serve some of the gains that we can achieve, and prevent the destabilizing impact of careless and random interference or intrusion? I think that's a big question for us, the geopolitical architecture. And finally, there is also, in many ways, opportunities, as we have mentioned, around business and technology. And in many ways, we have seen that in crises, the most profound innovations are discovered from the minerals and natural resources, from the potential 1/3 of all future natural gas reserves being available, to perhaps biosciences and medical sciences being beneficiaries of all that can be found. I think we also need to start looking at Arctic as ground zero of future tech. From space technologies to ocean technologies to climate technologies to biotechnologies. I think there is an opportunity here to rethink the business of Arctic, and Arctic as an incubator for new businesses. How do we think about a new business coalition for that region beyond just the traditional shipping and energy activities? And how do we create innovation framework in this particular region would be vital and could serve all of us in times to come. So I hope we can discuss some of these, and perhaps in the days ahead work together to find answers to some of these big questions. But I'm so happy that India is hosting this conference. President Grímsson, thank you for giving us an opportunity. Thank you for imagining India as part of the Arctic Circle. And like I promise everyone, we are too many not to be in your part of the world soon enough. So we will be coming for you. Thank you so much.
I now want to invite the incoming chair of the Senior Arctic Officials for the Arctic Council, Kenneth Høegh, here to the stage, as well as Torsten Nielsen, the Senior Arctic Official of the Kingdom of Denmark, who will join us for the questions and the answers. But let me also take this opportunity to thank Samir for his very interesting, visionary, and to some extent positively provocative statement here at the opening. I think he framed some of the crucial questions in a very open, honest, challenging, if I may say so, Indian tradition of putting things squarely on the table and inviting us to debate it in the democratic way. So thank you very much, Samir. So I will now invite Ambassador Høegh to make his statement, and afterwards we will open the floor for questions. So please be prepared with your questions. I think there are microphones standing here, which you can, if you want, line up for them. But this is a great opportunity to both listen to and test out the plans and the vision for the incoming chairmanship of the Arctic Council. Kenneth.
Firstly, many thanks to President Grímsson and also to the Indian government, the Arctic Circle team, to allow us to say a few words on the program of the Kingdom's chairship. Secondly, it's good to be back in South Asia. I have spent more than 5 years on postings here in South Asia. I worked in Nepal for 2 years and more than 3 years in Bangladesh. So I know very well the area here. So it's a little bit like coming home. The Kingdom of Denmark, consisting of Greenland, the Faroe Islands, and Denmark, will take over the chairship of the Arctic Council from Norway on May 12th. In this connection, the Greenland Minister for Foreign Affairs and Research, Ms. Vivian Motzfeldt, presented the Kingdom's chairship program for 25 to 27 last month on the 11th of April in Nuuk. The chairship program was prepared in close cooperation between Greenland, the Faroe Islands, and Denmark, in close consultation with stakeholders in our 3 countries. The Inuit Circumpolar Council, ICC, and the Faroese Institute of Marine Research have been particularly valuable partners and advisors in this process. We have also been in good and constructive contact with the present chair, Norway, regarding the program. And we must congratulate the Norwegian chairship for a professional and successful 2 years. I would say, against many odds, during difficult times, our Norwegian friends and colleagues has in many ways been able to revitalize our council activities, especially in terms of the activities of the working groups, as well as the cooperation between the chair and the permanent participant. As I already said, the kingdom consists of 3 countries with 3 different governments and peoples, which means that our coordination internally is important for us. This is very much the reason for the distribution of roles between us, having a Greenlandic political leadership, though still together with Denmark and the Faroe Islands, and among the diplomats, a Greenlander, that means me, as the chair of the SAOs, the senior Arctic official, a Faroese deputy chair, and as well a Danish diplomat, and this is Torsten, as the national senior Arctic official, where we all work together to achieve a successful chairship. We have, I'm sorry that we are not going to present it on the screen today, but let's see if we can do it tomorrow. And that's the beautiful logo of the chairship that has been designed by the Greenlandic artist Miki Jacobsen. And it's called the 3 seals, symbolizing not only the Arctic seals' adaptability to extreme conditions, but also symbolizing the close connection between the 3 countries of the Kingdom of Denmark, between Greenland, the Faroe Islands, and Denmark. And we all got seals. The seals are moving in a pack, presenting both maritime connectivity and cooperation, and supports thereby the goal shared by our 3 countries. In line with this symbolism, Greenland, the Faroe Islands, and Denmark will work closely together over the next 2 years to ensure that the people of the Arctic have an increased say in decisions that affect our lives, future, and our region. We have identified 5 priorities for the Kingdom's chairship program, all of which are reflected in the Arctic Council's strategic plan for 2021 to 2033. Firstly, indigenous peoples and the local inhabitants in the Arctic. I mean, that's a human dimension. And then sustainable economic development and energy transition, the ocean, climate change in the Arctic, and last but not least, the biodiversity. These priorities reflect both national interest as well as the Council's overall strategic goals. It is important to point out here that all our headlines involve a focus on indigenous peoples and indigenous knowledge. In addition to those 5 headlines, we will focus on youth engagement, mental health, gender equality, and suicide prevention. The chairship will have a strong focus on sustainable economic development with the aim of ensuring that initiatives in this area are led by the people of the Arctic for the benefit of all residents of the Arctic, thereby particularly strengthening the economies of indigenous people. People living in the Arctic, of course, have a natural interest in the activities and initiatives taking place in the region. Sustainable economic development must be promoted in a balanced way with respect for the different ways of life in the Arctic and the people's right to natural resources. Large parts of the Arctic is covered by the ocean, by the sea. The Arctic seas are of great importance to the peoples of the Arctic, including us in Greenland and our Faroese friends. We are all depending on the resources of the sea. For many of us, the ocean forms the framework of our livelihoods and lifestyle. We experience changes in the sea ice every day, and people are losing their way of life. We therefore need to strengthen our knowledge and monitoring of developments in our oceans that we can prepare for threats to our marine ecosystems, and we must always also focus on cooperation with emergency preparedness and shipping in the Arctic. On climate, we have to focus on that our youth will inherit the lands and the oceans after us. Therefore, the management of our lands and oceans is a crucial responsibility for future generations. Climate change in the Arctic affects all areas of work that we have in the Arctic Council. We see enormous consequences for our biodiversity, our ecosystems, and societies. Indigenous peoples are particularly affected by this, as environmental changes directly affect livelihoods, cultural practices, and general well-being. Biodiversity has long been a key priority for the Arctic Council. The chairmanship will continue to focus on monitoring and assessing changes in the Arctic biodiversity and ecosystem in interaction with indigenous knowledge. The chairship will have a strong focus on the crisis involving climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss. So then some some remarks reflecting some conclusions here. In 2026, the Arctic Council will celebrate its 30th anniversary, and the chairship sees this as an opportunity to strengthen the Council even in challenging times. The goal is for the Council to continue to play a central role in the Arctic in the coming decades. The chairship looks forward to working with the observers in the efforts to contribute to the positive developments in the Arctic. The many observers are a clear expression that what happens in the Arctic also affects the rest of the world. It's a message of responsibility, and it's a message of cooperation. The chairship wants to ensure that the Arctic Council is not only a forum for dialogue, but also a driving force for concrete actions that create positive results for the people in the Arctic. Here, the working groups are the tool that ensures action, and it's worth noting that the Sustainable Development Working Group, the working group with a special focus on the living conditions of the people in the Arctic, is actually led by a Greenlandic chairperson. It is therefore important that the cooperation that the chairship will continue to build will create a better future for the Arctic and for all who inhabit the Arctic. On behalf of the Kingdom of Denmark, the Faroe Islands, Denmark, and Greenland, I look forward with equal humility and anticipation to work as a chair among the 8 senior Arctic officials and the 6 indigenous peoples organizations, as well as the working groups under the Arctic Council, and the observers, to thereby ensure a successful chairship in which the cooperation is both developed and secured for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kenneth. Before we start the questions, maybe I can ask those who are helping us here. I know the microphones are there standing, but it seems to be more convenient since people are sitting here if you can have the microphone moved to those who raise their hands rather than people having to stand up and walk to these corners. So if it is technically possible to have one person there and one person there carrying the microphone to those who reach their hands. And while that is taking place, let me start the discussion and perhaps indicating the openness of which we want to have this dialogue. We all know how the invasion of Ukraine and the war had a momentous effect on the working of the Arctic Council. To some extent, one can divide the operations of the Arctic Council into the scientific cooperation and the working groups. Secondly, the diplomatic dialogue between the senior Arctic officials, and then the biannual ministerial meetings that take place. So, since we are in the country of the elephants, because we all know India is the ultimate country of the elephants. We see it symbolically, we see it also wherever we go in India. In the last 2 years, there was definitely a new elephant in the room of the Arctic Council, in the terms of Russia. And as I see it in recent months, with the statements coming out of Washington, there is a second elephant in the room of the Arctic Council, among the Arctic Summit. So, my friends here on the stage, I don't envy your challenge in the coming 2 years, having to deal with 2 elephants in the Arctic Council room. So, whereas you very diplomatically presented in your statement the various important issues that are of concern to the Arctic Council, may I ask you to start the dialogue by perhaps commenting within the framework of your diplomatic mandate. How are we going to answer? I say we, because it's not just your problem. How are we going to deal with this new situation of 2 elephants in the Arctic Council room? So maybe, Torsten, I ask you to start on that, and then we go to Kenneth. Yeah.
Thank you, President Grímsson, for that very light and easy question to start out on. You're right, there are elephants in the room, but it's no secret. I mean, the policies of the so-called like-minded countries, they've been clearly stated in official press statements. So yes, indeed, we have had a policy of freezing down very important elements of the Arctic cooperation. Whilst at the same time, we all agree, all 8, that the Arctic Council is extremely important, that it must survive and it must thrive. And that's also why, after immediately announcing a strategic pause after the invasion, a few months went by and we realized that not enough activity was ensured. And therefore, we started projects that Russia wasn't taking part in. Then later, we also started the virtual working group meetings. That's been very important. And I think as a chairship, one of our main tasks is, of course, in an organization that's guided by unanimity, is to seek the consensus of how can we keep the organization moving forward? How can we make sure that there is as much activity and vitality as possible, while at the same time respecting the sort of geopolitical limitations of what we can do with Russia. You're right that there might be new signals coming out of Washington. We will, of course, have to look at that and see what possible consensus can be reached.
Yeah. You want to add to that? Or?
Well, I would say that the core of the work in the Arctic Council is actually the working groups. I mean, that's where the actual work is being done by researchers and scientists, and the observers play a role there as well. And I think that's very important to remember, that we are having the virtual cooperation on the virtual level within the working groups. And I believe also the permanent participants is important to mention, that there is actually a cooperation going on there between the chairship. And that's something that the Norwegian chairship has been quite good at achieving. So it's not like everything is on pause in that sense. So I think that's important to say. But of course, we have the political level that's on pause. That's not happening for the time being due to the circumstances. But we have the written procedure among the SAOs.
So following those remarks, since we have many representatives of the observer states here, not only from Asia, like India, Japan, Korea, Singapore, but also from Europe, is it right to interpret what you just said, that you see an enhanced role for the observer states in the working groups during your chairmanship in order to some extent counterbalance these crises? Can you comment on that, how you see the role of the observer states in this context?
Yes, the role, as Kenneth also mentioned in his speech, of the observers is crucial. And also, reaching back to what Samir said a bit earlier, it's not an exclusive club. I think the way we've organized the Arctic Council is exactly by inviting in the world. And I could completely share what Samir said about the need for the rest of the world to also take part in the huge task of acquiring the knowledge we need about the Arctic and all these things. That also relates to the elephant question you had before, because of course there needs to be something to observe in order for the observing to be meaningful. And so what we can just say is that all the projects and the stuff that is going on is of course still open to the observers within the council. Then there are also lots of things that could be done outside of the council, bilaterally, etc. But you're right, and we ask a lot, I think, maybe from the observers in accepting the relatively low level of activity that we have. But nevertheless, this was put upon us. We didn't wish for this, but we're trying to make the most out of a complicated situation.
So, other questions from the hall? Please raise your hand even while somebody is speaking here, so we can see that. And as you have witnessed from both President Samir and myself, this is a forum where you can ask any question you want, I mean, straightforward in any way. So let me also encourage you to raise your hands, and the microphone will hopefully, yes, yeah, and maybe you introduce yourself briefly first there and then there, yeah.
Hi, good morning. I'm Rahul Banerjee. I am the founder of Rise in a House. We are a policy think tank in New Delhi. Congratulations on your upcoming chairmanship of the Arctic Council. I believe Denmark is also assuming the presidency of the European Union. Now, with the declining transatlantic partnership and Europe being fractured more than ever, how exactly will the geopolitical dynamics impact your chairmanship of the Arctic Council? And how do you aim to balance it?
Okay, let me take that second question also before.
Thank you, President Grímsson. Sir, my best wishes to you. My name is Anurag Bisain. I am a senior fellow with the Vivekananda International Foundation. I have got two questions. Before that, my best wishes to you on assuming the chairship of the Arctic Council. And to give credit to Norway, they did resume, as you said, the meetings of the working group, albeit in an online format. But, I mean, if you see, Russia is more of Arctic than all other 7 Arctic states put together. And Russia has held payments to the Arctic Council subscription in abeyance till normalcy resumes in the Arctic Council. Also, sir, I would like to draw your attention to the 2017 agreement, which is a binding agreement between the 8 Arctic states on enhancement of scientific cooperation that has been held in abeyance, or it is not effective since 2022. And also now there are findings that since Russia has more of the Arctic than the other 7 Arctic states put together, the climate change observations, the data exchange is on hold, the ground truthing of data is not happening, because of which they don't know whether the anomalies in the data is because of absence of Russian data or the climate change itself. How do you intend, or do you have any specific programs, because you listed out 5 priorities. If Russia is not included, I mean, what do you see the success in your chairship for 2 years of those priorities? So do you have any specific plans for inclusion of Russia, or I mean, are you waiting for a signal from the Washington to resume them? My second question is, sir, regarding the Arctic Council work with the observer states. Now, very welcome that you want more observer state participation, but as per the current rules of the Arctic Council, observers are limited in any project to half the project cost, sir, and they have to partner with an Arctic Council state. Now, giving an example of India, India may be interested, as it was brought out, that monsoons are existential for us, and we would like more to research into the teleconnections between the Arctic and the Indian monsoons. But again, India is limited by the amount of research funds it can put. So do you have any plans to enhance the observer states contribution in research projects, at least to start with? Thank you.
So, Kenneth, you want to, which one of you want to talk? Yeah.
Well, any changes in the formats within we work needs discussions. And right now, what we are doing is what we are doing. But of course, we are open for discussing, and this is also what we have seen under the Norwegian chairship, that we have seen especially the work in the working groups, that we have started the work in the working groups, and that has been very helpful. I mean, it's all based on consensus. That's what we need. We need consensus. If changes is going to happen, when changes is going to happen, this is going to be based on the consensus among all 8 members of the Arctic Council. I don't know if you could supplement on the observers, please.
Yeah. Just answering maybe the 2 complex questions together. Indeed, I mean, 2025 it's a diplomatic super year for Denmark. We're, as you point out, in the second half of the year with the EU presidency. We're also on the Security Council at the moment, so it's a big task for a small country. And the first question was into the difficulties of geopolitical balancing in this situation, and I assume what was behind it was the new administration in the US mainly. Just to be completely honest, of course, that doesn't necessarily help. I don't think that the Arctic Council is the most complicated place when it comes to possible differences of opinion between Europe and America, but within the Arctic Council, certainly the approach that's still not very clearly defined by the new administration in the US does not make it easier to move forward. But in some aspects it could. I mean, the Trump administration's attitude to climate change, for instance, might make it more difficult. Their position vis-a-vis the Russians might make certain things easier. And that leads me into the other question about Russia. Fully agree that Russia is the biggest and most important single Arctic state, and the Council was exactly created to enable cooperation with all the Arctic states, and Russia is just the biggest by any measure, you know, population, coastline, area. Nevertheless, we still have made the decisions that we have, and we of course have to work with whatever we can do, but that is a difficulty, and there's no easy solution for that. In terms of input to changes, that's how I hear you in how the observers could contribute. We're happy to, you know, hear what all the observers have to say about this. For instance, I see our Polish colleague in the back there, who's hosting the so-called Warsaw format, and we're going to meet in September in Poland to get the inputs from all the observer states. And we will, of course, listen to what they have to say. I think, as a general disclaimer, I would say it's probably hard to make major changes in this situation that we're in. It's complicated. Sorry for the long answer.
Okay, so there's a question there and then another one here. So let's first go there. Lady, please. Yes. If you can introduce yourself. Yes. No, first here. Yes. No, yeah, that's the second question. That will be the second question. Then the first question, yeah, please. If you can introduce yourself, please.
Morning. Congratulations for chairship. My question is related to indigenous people. And so your first commitment, what you reiterated just now, that indigenous people were one of your priority domains. But I just want to bring in here that you do have something in 2004, the AHDR, and then one in 2014. And there are also complexities that you write in your report that talks about not really being able to identify ethnicity of the indigenous people. It's in your report. And so indigenous people in Finland, Sweden, Norway, and even Russia is about 4% of the population, while in Greenland, 90%, in Canada, 50%. And we don't really know what there is no AHDR. So what is the limitation? Why we don't have the AHDR? What are the data constraints? If we are working towards, if the Arctic Council indeed is working towards the betterment of indigenous communities, why aren't we having data?
Yeah. Okay. You want to come?
No, I didn't quite get it.
Okay. So can you perhaps summarize it in a clear way so Ambassador Høegh can?
Yeah, AHDR, the Arctic Human Development Report, we have from Iceland that comes out. So there are two, one 2004, the other is 2014, and then thereafter there aren't. So we don't know the status of indigenous communities in the report, because you have ethnicity issues also. So Sami, or for Inuit for that matter, we do not know the data related to that. If indeed climate change is impacting these populations, where do we go for understanding that?
So it's really a comment. I mean, I find it extremely important that these figures are pretty clear and up to date. So this is something that I would like to note. And I think we should just remember that there's work that hasn't been done that we should have a thorough look at. I don't know if Torsten, if you would like to. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, there's a question here in the middle.
Good morning. My name is Rear Admiral Alok Bhatnagar. I am a retired naval officer. Presently, I work with the MIT Education Group. Firstly, President Grímsson, congratulations on setting up the Arctic Council and running it for so long. The stellar leadership is quite apparent here. My question and comment is regarding Arctic governance, which is mainly, I would say, run by the Arctic Council and a series of other organizations. And in the absence of any treaty like the Antarctic Treaty, which I understand in the education as well as in the think tank circles, it is a non-issue or a non-starter for the Arctic. And therefore, we are running whatever we are as per the Arctic regime complex with the myriad organizations that do various things. Then the Arctic Council itself, which since its inception, although it has evolved in terms of numbers, but the role of the Arctic Council remains the same, which is mainly regarding environment and sustainable development, also looking after the indigenous people's well-being. But nobody in this entire regime complex is addressing the issue of security in that region. So while all the development that is happening, sustainable or otherwise, and the availability of natural resources is creating tensions, that is very well known, and it may eventually lead to some military tension there, and there has to be an organization or a part of the Arctic Council that should address that issue. Thank you.
I would say that that's actually one of the foundations of the Arctic Council, that we are not dealing with security issues, because that makes it possible. I would say it actually makes it possible to discuss all the rest. So I think it's probably a good idea not to involve it, because then we can concentrate on these issues that is so crucial for us as well. And then, yeah, I don't know if you would like to.
I agree that there is a growing concern over security issues. Completely agree with Kenneth that I think one of the main reasons for the success of the Arctic Council is the fact that we left out security questions. And that does not mean they don't exist. The Arctic NATO allies are prioritizing security more and more. Also within NATO, there is a growing focus on that. Our national position, and we share that with our friends and our allies, is that we want to ensure that the Arctic is secure, but we also want to do so in a non-escalatory way. But let me just remind you that Russia started a military buildup in the region roughly 10 years ago. There's an increased long-term Chinese interest in the region. But we should also keep our heads cool in the sense that there still is very limited military presence and activity in the Arctic, and the North Atlantic is a different issue. But this is not really; these are not matters that I believe can be handled in the Arctic Council.
Well, yeah, okay. I just want to follow a little bit up on this Arctic security thing. Did you want to do that? Okay. You want to have a question on the security? Yeah, okay.
Thank you, President. My name is Petter Vuorenki. I'm Finland's Arctic ambassador. I just feel a responsibility to insert a little footnote to what my two dear colleagues said when they referred to the Arctic Council not dealing with security issues. The Arctic Council does not deal with military security issues, but the Arctic Council does deal with the whole range of other security issues, ranging from climate security, environmental security, human security, food security, health security. The Arctic Council even has a dedicated working group on emergency preparedness, prevention, and response. In the context of the Arctic Council, the Arctic Coast Guard Forum has been established. In the context of the Arctic Council, the EU-Arctic Network has been established, which addresses several security-related issues. So I think it's important for the wider audience to make a difference between the concept of military security and then a wider security, which is a very important issue that the Arctic Council does address. Thank you.
Thank you. Kenneth.
Yeah, and during the last few chairship, the Council have moved more and more in the direction of the human dimension in the Arctic. And this is something that we are looking further into in our chairship program. I mean, the development of the economies within the Arctic, among indigenous peoples and among the inhabitants of the Arctic, that we are having a stronger focus on that.
Let me, yeah, okay.
May I just, thank you, Petri, of course, fully agree that this is important to note. I think also the very existence of the Council originally is something that provides better conditions for peace and stability and security, because we cooperate with Russia on a number of issues that are important to us. Yeah.
So let me use these final minutes to raise two other issues. But before I do that, yes, both of you, as well as the distinguished Finnish Arctic ambassador, are absolutely correct in terms of describing what has been the situation so far with respect to the Arctic Council and security, especially military security. But, as we have observed in the Arctic Circle Assembly, now for 3 years, Admiral Bauer, the chair of the Military Committee of NATO, has eagerly accepted invitations to come to the Arctic Circle Assembly, actually initiating himself his first appearance following our encounter at the München Security Conference. And now his successor, the new chair of the Military Committee of NATO, has already expressed his interest in coming to the Assembly to follow his predecessor, to make a speech as the new chair of NATO's Military Committee. So, to our surprise, and it was not our planning, the annual Arctic Circle Assembly has become a platform for the chair of NATO's Military Committee to address the Arctic gathering. Of course, we will accept the new chair of the Military Committee of NATO to come. So that is the reality that we face in the Arctic Circle in planning the Assembly. And also, I think we cannot overlook the fact that now all the so-called Arctic 7 are NATO members. So different from when the Arctic Council was formed on the policy of what you correctly described as not a platform to discuss security issues. The Council now formally consists of 7 NATO members and Russia. And I think as a political scientist and former professor, that's bound to have some implications or not. Anyhow, I just wanted to make those comments. My first question to you is this. If we look at the involvement of the Asian countries in the Arctic since they were accepted as observer states in 2013 at the Kiruna meeting chaired by Carl Bildt and voted in by John Kerry. I always keep that on the record to remind people who are complaining about the arrival of the Asian states. We have seen, for example, in Iceland, other parts of the Arctic, that both the United Arab Emirates and also Malaysia have become major investors in the growing tourism hospitality sector in our countries. We also witness an interest of other non-Arctic companies from Asia to engage and have a presence in the Arctic economic systems. And if we also look at the growing scientific capability of the Asian countries, the observer states, since they became observers in 2013, I would say that the combined scientific strength of the Asian countries with respect to the Arctic exceeds the capability of any Arctic state except the United States if we include NASA in the US equation. But if we take NASA out of the US equation, one can reasonably argue that the combined scientific strength of the Asian countries exceeds the scientific capability of every Arctic state now. That's the reality of what has happened in the 12 years since the Asian countries became observer states. So I think Samir has raised a very correct, important issue. How are we systematically going to deal with this growing involvement, I would say positive involvement in economic terms as well as scientific terms, of the Asian observer states? Because at the moment we don't have any formal structure. Yes, the Arctic Circle puts on these forums and assemblies and facilitate these discussions. No, but still, they are classified by the rest of us as Arctic states, as observers in a different category. So can I ask you to reflect a little bit, very briefly, on how you can see the changing mechanism of dealing positively with this growing real engagement? Then I'm not talking about the political, diplomatic, I'm just talking about the scientific and economic involvement.
Yeah, when we have application from observer states to be, then of course we need consensus for letting new observers in. Saying that, then I think when you are standing in the queue, so to say, then I think it's important still to engage with the Arctic on a bilateral level. I mean, I think that would be extremely important while waiting, that countries that are very eager to become observers, that's very positive. In the period standing in the queue, it would be, I think, good for everybody if they are engaging bilaterally with the Arctic countries of the Arctic Council.
Thank you. Also, President Grímsson, I fully share your evaluation of the enormous capacity and effort that's being made by the Asian observers. Just to mention a few, I mean, the research vessels, icebreaking capability of the coming Japanese ship, the South Korean efforts in this regard. And we do have a lot of cooperation bilaterally as well. I mean, for instance, with India, Denmark is now embarked on a project on navigation in ice-filled waters. That is a very concrete example of things we do with the Asian observers. But as I also hinted to before, I mean, the Arctic is really, there's a lot of stuff we don't know. It's expensive, sometimes even dangerous to be in the Arctic. So this contribution by the Asian observers is absolutely crucial for the Arctic and for the Arctic Council.
And as a Greenlander, I would say that, I mean, we are more than welcoming, discussions with observers to be discussing with us fields of cooperation. Thank you.
Well, in the interest of keeping to the schedule of time announced in the program, I want to thank both of you for facilitating this opening of the forum by bringing us straight to the incoming program on vision and challenges of the new chairship of the Arctic Council. It will not be easy, but as you have sensed from the people here, you will be followed by great interest and anticipation by people, not just in the Arctic, but all over the world. And your constituency is partly, as is demonstrated here, not just the Arctic states, but people interested and engaged in the Arctic in Asia, Middle East, and other parts of the world. It's interesting that in the last 10 years, and especially in the last few years, those who hold these important Arctic offices, like the two of you here on the stage, now have a constituency reaching the entire world. And how we cope with that is something that we hope here today and tomorrow at the Indian Forum we will learn some important lessons, because we are all in a new territory. We're all in a new territory. And how this journey succeeds will impact the entire world. So thank both of you very much, especially Kenneth, I want to thank you at the time where you have to move your family from Washington to Copenhagen and Nuuk, and time is very precious. You still made the effort to join us here in India so early in your new responsibilities. We will now have a short 10-15 minutes coffee break, but then the session will directly follow this last discussion here on the stage, where we will talk about the future of the Arctic with a perspective from the Asian states, and then the perspective from the Arctic and the European states. And those problematic challenges will directly follow the final part of our discussion here on the stage. So thank you very much.